So let's just finish off the lecture with some observations. So first of all, some guidelines. Most things are done by matplotlib by default, although, as I've said before, you can override pretty much everything. But some guidelines is don't show too many time series in the same chart. So whether it's a line plot or a stacked area plot, don't show too many of them. And some of the examples I've given you do have too many in. Start the y-axis at 0 if at all possible or if appropriate. Sometimes it's already been clear because you've done that in another picture, so you can avoid it, as I've done it again in some of the plots. But it's always a good idea to start at 0 for the first look at the data. So what can we tell from the data? We found out quite a lot more than we knew last week. So we knew about relative segments last week. Remember, we're not making business decisions, but what we can see is that some products have considerable variation and peaks and troughs. Okay, peaks and troughs is interesting, so we'll look at that in topic 5 in a couple of weeks. We can easily identify the trends, so whether they're going up and down. That's quite clear. And it's also easy to spot some what I've called anomalies where a product wasn't available. So we saw, I think it's D, isn't it, that's growing suddenly from the middle of the year to the sales go shooting up, and G was disappeared for a quarter. So we can spot those things quite clearly with some of these plots, especially when we overlay the rolling averages or the average. It makes it much clearer. Trend line doesn't necessarily spot those things. A trend line in this picture wouldn't help necessarily spot that D was flat at the beginning of the year. So you'd have to notice that with something else. Okay, there's G again, disappeared for the quarter, as I mentioned. So what have we seen today? We've looked at visualizing the relative proportions using line plots and area plots. These give us much more insight into the data than just doing the total sales over the year. And we can get even further into it by using averages to get rid of some of the noise, rolling averages to perhaps be a bit more accurate, a bit closer fitting to the data, and trend lines to explore which direction they're going in. And again, a key technique that I'll emphasize over and over again is this idea of segmentation, of taking a chunk of the data that's kind of coherent and just visualizing that bit. If there's too much data, if you're only dealing with a few variables, then you don't need to bother. But if there's too many variables, like 25 can be too many, can be overwhelming in a picture, then you need to do some segmentation. 250 to 25,000, then you definitely need to do some, and maybe some aggregating. But we'll talk more about that later. Okay, I hope you found that interesting, and I'll see you next week.